What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. And yeah, I'm sure you're not surprised, but it was another amazing day of NBA playoff hoops. They continue to not disappoint. It's been one of the best playoffs in recent history up through this point. And if we continue on this trend, I feel like we're going to be talking about the 2023 NBA playoffs for quite some time. I mean, there have been game winners, crazy back and forth matchups, individual performances like we've never seen. It's just been amazing. And we kind of knew this was a possibility coming into things, but to see it actually happen before my eyes, it's been amazing. It's a great time to be an NBA fan. These playoffs, like I said, have been historically great, and it continued yesterday, starting off with Sixers-Celtics Game 4, which might have been the best game of these historically great playoffs up to this point. And I know that might sound a bit crazy because of all the amazing games that we've gotten, but trust me, this one was kind of unlike anything I've seen so far. And originally, it felt like it was going to be a Sixers blowout. Now, we had seen the Celtics win a couple of games, one of which was in blowout fashion. We saw the Sixers win a really close Game 1 after that James Harden game winner over Al Horford, but we had yet to see a dominant performance from the Philadelphia 76ers, and it felt like that this might be the game where we get that, because they were great for the first half, maybe even three quarters, first half of the third quarter. They were dominant. They were leading by 16 at one point in the third quarter. In the first half, James Harden and Joel Embiid were electric. It was one of the best stretches we've ever seen from this duo, where they really showcased their true potential, where they were both dominating at scores, ripping the Celtics defense apart, one of the best defenses in the league, could do nothing to stop them. Embiid was dominant getting to his spots, and if they sent a double or sent a lot of pressure, he was making the right read, kicking it out to a shooter or getting over to James Harden, who'd make his own play. He was playmaking at a high level, knocking down threes, attacking the basket, showing a bit more burst than we had seen from him at points during this season. They were both incredible. Like, when they were playing like this as a duo, it makes sense why a lot of people consider them one of the top pairings in the entire league. They were electric. This is, if you're a Philly fan, exactly what you want to see. This is what you feel like you can get on any given night. It's just a matter of them doing it consistently. But in this game, they were executing when it mattered most. And through the first three quarters, they clearly looked like the better team, even though the Boston Celtics did make a bit of a comeback late in the third quarter. Jason Tatum woke up after shooting 1 for 9 in the first half to score 13 points on perfect shooting in the third. Jaylen Brown was really good in the first half, but got a bit quieter as the game went on, even though he was still playing some really solid defense. And Philly went from up 16 to, only up 9 at the end of the third, but still that's a pretty solid lead. However, then we saw kind of one of those usual Philadelphia 76ers collapses that I'm sure Sixers fans know exactly what I'm talking about. I know because I've watched countless Sixers games with my older brother, who's a Sixers fan himself. And when this started to happen, he was like, yeah, this is kind of what we see from Philadelphia typically, where, especially against Boston, it feels like where the Sixers have always had some issues. They'll get big leads and they'll look like the better team for a majority of the game. But by the end of things, Boston kind of just turns up the pressure, especially defensively. They were locked in the fourth quarter. Al Horford was playing some of the best Joel Embiid defense that I have ever seen, and he typically is a good Joel Embiid defender, but this was on like another level. Like, Embiid was very clearly bothered by this. He got blocked more than a couple of times in this fourth quarter. It honestly felt like every single time Embiid tried to go at Al Horford, he was getting stonewalled completely, and there was nothing he could do. It was a perfect mix of giving Embiid a little bit of space so he couldn't foul bait, but also not giving him enough space to drive by you. He was playing him perfectly. Like, super big shout to Al Horford for the way that he defended Joel Embiid, and suddenly the Sixers went from up 9 at the beginning of the quarter to tied around 5 minutes, and they were down 5 with just a couple of minutes to go after Brogdon hit a three that honestly kind of felt like a dagger. It felt like a big momentum shot where Boston was just going to bring this thing home. Philly had collapsed after having a massive lead. They were going to go down 3-1 on their home court going back to Boston, and it would probably be the end of this Sixers team as we know it. However, a new face in this Sixers-Boston rivalry showed up at the exact perfect time to save this thing, and that man is James Harden. And I'm really glad I have another chance to talk about Harden being great in the playoffs, because I didn't have the chance after his Game 1 performance. I tried to make a video, but I had a flight the next morning pretty early, and I was traveling all throughout the day, so I just didn't have a chance to talk about the James Harden game like I wanted to. But now I finally have the chance to go ahead and talk about James Harden again in these playoffs, because he saved the Philadelphia 76ers in this game. They had a chance to fall down 3-1, even though they took that big Game 1 in Boston, where James Harden again saved them, hitting that game winner over Al Horford, stealing that game without Joel Embiid in Boston. He also had a playoff career high in that one. It was a massive moment for a guy that many people have called a playoff choker for the entirety of his career. It was a big statement from James Harden. But after that game in games 2 and 3, he really struggled. He shot 5 of 28 from the field combined in those games for just 12 and 16 points. It was really rough, and it felt like, okay, maybe we just got one flash in the pan from James Harden. Maybe he'll still have some good games, but who knows if we're going to see that dominant, crazy Game 1 James Harden again in this series. But in Game 4, he showed up again. Like I said, for the first 3 quarters, he was amazing, and although Joel Embiid kind of faded a little bit in the fourth because of Al Horford's great defense, but James Harden continued his dominance. In the last few minutes, he hit so many big shots. It's unbelievable how he just continued to knock them down. He had a pull-up jumper to close the gap before that Brogdon 3, which put the Celtics up 5. He had a finger roll layup to cut the deficit to 3, which gave the Sixers to tie it off a PJ Tucker putback layup, and one which was one of the biggest plays as well. Shout out to PJ Tucker, who really doesn't score much, but he always makes those big time hustle plays. That was one of the biggest of the entire season for the Sixers. He also really laid into Joel Embiid after that shot, telling him like, hey, you need to be more aggressive. You're the MVP, stuff like that, which is exactly what the Sixers have needed a veteran to do for quite some time. But yeah, PJ Tucker, big play that tied the game up after that huge James Harden layup. And then with 17 seconds to go, Sixers down 2, he hit an incredibly tough floater, which was kind of vintage James Harden. Like, we don't really see those really tough floaters from Harden as much anymore. His finishing has declined quite a bit from his Houston days, but this was a vintage James Harden shot that tied the game up and sent it to overtime after Marcus Smart missed a 3 at the buzzer. Just unbelievable shot after unbelievable shot from James Harden to keep this game together, to prevent the Sixers from collapsing, send the game to overtime, and give them a shot to steal the win again in OT. And again in overtime, it felt like the Sixers and Celtics were battling back and forth, but ultimately that the Celtics started to get the upper hand. Jason Tatum hit a super clutch step back 3 with about 38 seconds left to go to put the Celtics up by 2. But again, the beard showed up. With Boston doubling Embiid down low, Joel Embiid swung the ball to James Harden in the corner, who was ready, and he drilled a corner 3 to put the Sixers up 1, giving him 42 points before Marcus Smart would just barely not get his game-winning 3 off in time, moving the series to a 2-2 tie heading back to Boston off the back of James Harden. It was one of the wildest games I've ever watched. So many clutch buckets, great defensive plays, Jason Tatum hitting that crazy step back 3 at the end of overtime. James Harden sending the game to overtime with that floater. PJ Tucker with that crazy and one. Marcus Smart very nearly winning the game, not once but twice. He just was like 0.3 seconds off from hitting a game-winning 3 to give the Celtics a 3-1 advantage. And most importantly, James Harden clutching up at the end of the game, hitting that game-winning corner 3 off of the Joel Embiid pass off the double to give the Sixers a 2-2 tie on the series, preventing them from a pretty detrimental and honestly probably season-ending 3-1 deficit. It was amazing. He saved the Sixers again for the second time this series. And all in all, Harden finished this game with 42 points, 8 boards, 9 dimes, 4 steals, and a block on 70% shooting, going 6 of 9 from deep in addition to his multiple clutch time plays. This is why you get a guy like James Harden for these moments. The Celtics were honed in on stopping Joel Embiid, the MVP of the league's leading scorer, especially on that last play where, honestly, Jaylen Brown should not have left Joel Embiid. He should not have left Harden wide open in the corner. A 2 obviously is not what you want, but that ties the game. It gives the Celtics plenty of time to go ahead and take a lead, and even if they don't make a shot, it still goes to double overtime. You can't help off the three-point shooter there, especially not James Harden, who has been hitting super big clutch shots and is just honestly on fire for the game. It's a bad play from Jaylen Brown there, but he had to help on Joel Embiid, or he felt like he had to, because Embiid is such a dominant scorer, and so you give the ball to Harden, you trust in your teammate who's one of the best scorers of all time, and he delivered. I mean, those clutch shots, he was great playmaking-wise, he played super well off Joel Embiid. It's everything that you've wanted to see from James Harden as a Sixer, and I know a lot of people are going to bring up his struggles in Game 2 and 3, which are very valid. You need him to be a bit more consistent. But with these performances in games 1 and 4, Harden saved the Sixers. He has saved their season. I mean, if he doesn't hit that game winner in game 1, if he doesn't hit the game winner in game 4 here, the Sixers could have gotten swept. Like, this series might be over if not for the heroics of James Harden in those first and fourth games. In past series against Boston, Philly didn't have a guy like this. If Embiid wasn't playing well, they had Ben Simmons who had some big moments, but if Embiid wasn't dominating, they were going to lose. Now, Embiid can, still be great like he was in this game, but down the stretch, he's not playing super well. They can still win because they have a guy like James Harden who can take over. He completely shifts the dynamic, gives them another high-level offensive option to take over if Embiid just doesn't have it going. And again, after all the playoff choker narratives that James Harden has dealt with over the course of his career, it's so nice to see him have these big time moments where he says, hey, I can do this on the biggest stage, even though people have been calling me washed. People are making fun of me after those Game 2 and Game 3 performances. I've still got this. I can still be this clutch, big time scorer who can dominate, just completely eviscerate one of the league's best defenses when I'm really locked in. It was amazing to watch. He really turned back the clock and showed that he still has some of that juice that he had back in Houston. I mean, again, just that Game 1 performance too, taking it to Boston on their home court without Joel Embiid, an amazing performance. Games 1 and Game 4 of this series are two of the best performances that we have ever seen from James Harden in his playoff career. The Sixers need more of this guy. If they can get this James Harden for at least one or two more of these games, they've got a real chance to defeat their demons, make it out of the second round, and do it against Boston, who has terrorized them in the playoffs for the past few seasons ever since this Joel Embiid era started. So shout out to James Harden. He was amazing in this one, whether he's scoring, he's playmaking. Hopefully we get more of this Game 1, Game 4 James Harden the rest of the way. I really hope this series goes 7 games, if I'm being honest. It's been really fun to watch so far. These two teams match up well. They've both got some big advantages. They've got crazy star power on both sides. Also, the role players just have the capability of making those amazing plays left and right. It was just an incredible game. I can't believe how many big shots there were. James Harden in particular was amazing. He deserves his flowers in this game, in this series. Just as a player as a whole, Harden has been one of the most disrespected players for his entire career. He's always been capable of doing stuff like this, but the fact that he's doing it now of all times, when the Sixers need him most, makes it just that more special. So yeah, shout out to James Harden, who not just saved the Sixers in this one, he saved them back in Game 1, and he has saved their season as a whole in this series. We'll see if he can do it again. As for Boston, like I mentioned, it was kind of just a story of two halves for their stars. Jason Tatum really struggled in the first half, but turned it up in the second. Meanwhile, Jaylen Brown was super aggressive and dominant in the first half, but kind of faded into the background in the second, which again is a theme that we've seen from Jaylen Brown a couple of times in these playoffs so far. He'll start off really aggressive and be their best player for the first quarter or two, and then by the time the second half rolls around, you kind of forget he's out there. He only had 5 shots in the second half, which is not ideal for your all-star, maybe even all-NBA second best player. Tatum was great, but he needs to defer to Jaylen Brown a bit more, I feel like, and really just everybody on this roster as a whole has to get Jaylen Brown involved. He's got to be aggressive, demand the ball, say, hey, I need to be involved in these big-time moments, and maybe if he is, part of the offense a bit more down the stretch, the Celtics end up winning this game. It wasn't the case. Him and Jason Tatum have to get a bit more in sync. Joe Mazzulla's got to figure out how to keep JB involved all throughout all 4 quarters. And if they can do that, the Celtics still have a pretty good shot to go ahead and win this series. But I have been a bit concerned about kind of just how disjointed the Celtics offense has felt at times. It feels like they really haven't been able to slam the door shut on opponents throughout these playoffs, and that's kind of been a theme for them this entire season. And if they make it out of this series, make the conference finals or the NBA finals, you can't have that happen because those teams aren't going to let that slide. Next, we can go ahead and move on to Suns Nuggets Game 4, and I'm so excited that I finally get to talk about this series. This is one that I've been dying to go ahead and speak to y'all about. Like I said in my video yesterday, it's just not lined up really with how busy my schedule has been. I've been traveling back and forth, and somehow this game and this series as a whole, along with the Boston-Philly series, have kind of fallen behind to the wayside. But finally, I get a chance to talk about this series, which is delivered in every way for being one of my most anticipated for these entire playoffs. Denver, of course, went up 2-0 at home and kind of looked like the better squad, but after Game 3 and Game 4 yesterday, Phoenix has tied up this series 2-2 going back to Denver, and it was in large part due to the play of Devin Booker, who's looked like one of the best players in the entire world in these playoffs. It was a game where he finished with 36 points, 6 rebounds, and 12 assists on 14 of 18 shooting, which is just otherworldly efficiency, and some of the shots that he's knocking down right now are just unbelievably contested, but he makes it look so easy. I mean, he could be shooting a fadeaway jumper out of bounds in the corner behind the basket, and he's going to knock it down with ease. Like, it looks like nothing. His three-point shooting has been on fire after being a bit inconsistent as a three-point shooter in the regular season, especially towards the end. He really just wasn't even shooting threes, and now he's knocking them down with ease. The usual crazy contested mid-range jumpers are nothing for him. Whether it's a pull-up, whether it's a turnaround, a fadeaway, it doesn't matter. He's attacking the basket at a high level too, and he's doing all of this while playing incredibly great defense. He's playmaking at a high level. He's been unstoppable. And if we look back at Game 3, where he dropped 47.6 rebounds and 9 assists on 20 of 25 shooting, over the last 2 games, Devin Booker has put up 83 points while shooting 34 of 43 from the field, which is good for about 80% shooting, while Denver is throwing everything they can at him. I mean, of course, they still have to respect Kevin Durant and the other guys on this roster, but Denver is really honing in on Devin Booker in particular. They were saying, okay, This guy is on another planet right now. We have to throw everything we can at him defensively, try and stop him from beating us, but it's not working. Devin Booker is still making great plays, whether it's playmaking, whether it's just beating a double team because he's just better. It's been unbelievable. I mean, he's locked in. He's playing the best basketball of his career right now. And there are very few players, if any, that are on the level that Devin Booker is at this moment in these playoffs. He is very quickly rising up my list of best players in the league. There have been so many people that I have seen say that, hey, Devin Booker is firmly top 10. He might be top 8, top 7. I've even seen some people say that he's top 5 in the league right now. That's how great that Devin Booker is playing at this moment. He is at the absolute peak of his powers right now. It's been amazing to watch. And of course, he's also being aided by Kevin Durant, who in this one had 36 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists on 11 of 19 shooting. Sometimes even getting left open because the Nuggets are just so scared about giving Devin Booker any single coverage at this point. And KD, of course, is going to take advantage of those opportunities. These two as a duo have carried Phoenix for the most part in this series. And really just throughout the playoffs as a whole, they have been unstoppable, looking like the best offensive duo in the world right now. They're going to keep needing these performances, to be honest, from these two guys. The rest of Phoenix's roster just isn't great. They're going to need an offseason coming up in a few months to really reshape this thing, give Devin Booker and Kevin Durant a bit more help, give them some more shooters, although shout to Landry Shamet, who had a big game last night helping the Suns get this win. But they definitely need more help. They're going to keep needing just these inhuman performances from Kevin Durant and Devin Booker if they want to win this series and advance to the conference finals, maybe even advance to the NBA finals. They need them to be two of the best players in the world, but the way that they're playing right now, I honestly think they could kind of do that. I think they can carry the Suns through this series and deeper into the playoffs. That's just how good that they've been as a duo. Then on Denver's side, Nikola Jokic had his best game of the playoffs, and honestly, one of the best games of the playoffs as a whole, where he kind of tried to single-handedly outduel Devin Booker and Kevin Durant for the most part in this game. Jamal Murray was a help. I will talk about him a bit later, but Jokic himself was completely unstoppable, looking like maybe the best player in the world in this one. He dropped 53 points on 67% shooting to go with 4 boards and 11 dimes. By the way, that 53 points is a playoff career high coming from him. He was just completely abusing the Suns defense, as he has done this entire series. If they sent a double, he made them pay playmaking wise. He also just did that even if they overextended the tiniest bit. If they tried to hedge him off a screen, he was making the right read to Jamal Murray, whoever else was open every single time. He's just unbelievable. We have never seen a player like Nikola Jokic, a guy who is so dominant, just scoring the ball as a center while also being one of the best passers and playmakers in the entire league. He has an argument for being the single best in that regard. Unbelievable what we've seen from Nikola Jokic in these playoffs so far, this entire season from him, who he has grown into as a player. There are some moments where I found myself just laughing at some of the stuff Nikola Jokic did. It just doesn't make sense. When you take a look at him out there on the court, he'll hit some moves and some shots where it's like there's absolutely no way that's going in, and it does. He'll throw the most nutty passes that even though you're watching the game from like a bird's eye view, you still don't know how he makes that pass or how he sees that pass even. He just makes it happen. It's unbelievable. He is such a fun player to watch. Outside of Jokic, Jamal Murray was really good with 28 points, 5 boards, and 7 dimes and over 50% shooting. He gave the Joker some good help, but ultimately, the two of them couldn't outduel Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And meanwhile, the third member of their big three, Michael Porter Jr., did not have a good game. He shot 4 of 13 from the field, including a just absolutely terribly timed pull-up 3 in transition, which I think ended up airballing. He claimed that he got hit or got blocked or something. It didn't look like it did on the replay. It kind of just looked like he missed it. It was just a terrible play. It felt like the Nuggets were kind of building a bit of momentum. Nikola Jokic was unstoppable. Jamal Murray was playing well. Even like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was shooting the lights out. Aaron Gordon was 50% from the field. It felt like there were so many other better shots that they could have gotten. And I know that's Michael Porter Jr.'s game where he's this elite pull-up, like near 7-footer type shooter that can just knock down these crazy, ridiculous shots that other players can't. But at the same time, it feels like that's just a horrible time for that type of look. You got to slow the thing down. You got to get the ball to either Jamal Murray or Nikola Jokic, let those guys work. And maybe if they get pressured, you're wide open for a catch and shoot 3, and then you can take that look. It just felt like it was a terribly ill-advised timed shot that kind of killed the Nuggets' momentum that they were building, and ultimately might have ended up closing the door shut on this game for the Denver Nuggets. Well, with all that being said, those are my thoughts on these games from tonight. Let me know what your biggest takeaways were from these two games in the comment section below. Thank you again for all the support that y'all have shown on these recap videos. They're really fun to do, and I appreciate y'all just giving me a platform to ramble about basketball because it's one of my favorite things to do. But yeah, again, shout out to James Harden, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, everybody who balled out out in these playoffs today and everybody who's going to continue to do so. They've been incredible so far. I'm looking forward to some amazing playoff action tonight as well. We've got game 4 of Knicks versus Heat and Lakers versus Warriors. We'll see if we get a couple more 2-2 ties in those series tonight. But yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It helps the channel out a ton. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.